Tony, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me again, Justin.
Yes, glad to have you back. And for those who aren't familiar, had Tony on the Just Go Grind podcast over a year ago now. Oyster has grown a lot since then. A lot has happened, which is why we're chatting. And there's a lot going on in the world. So many things to chat about in this episode. But for those who didn't listen to the other podcasts, aren't as familiar with Oyster, let's just start there. What is Oyster, Tony?
Oyster is a global employment platform. We enable companies to hire people anywhere in any country without the need to set up entity. So we offer them the ability to extend a fair and a safe employment contract to them, enable them to process the payroll compliantly and accurately, and extend to them benefits that are locally relevant.
With this company, so I mentioned the growth. 2020 is when you started in January. It's funny, you have a nice like timeline in your announcement of your latest funding of $150 million. The growth is insane. It's only been 2 years. It's $1 billion plus company. Obviously, this has a lot to do with the world we're living in more broadly, why this has caught on so far, so fast. But just take me through, even since we chatted in the last year, what's really fueled that growth of Oyster to this point where you're able to raise another round of funding. I think you raised 220 plus million in the last 2 years. Like, what's really fueled that growth for Oyster?
There are a number of trends that are really shaping the demand for global employment. First, you start with talent shortage, especially in the West for knowledge workers. The world is really transforming. There is a digital transformation trend that requires a lot of technical people and knowledge workers to come and participate in the knowledge era of the economy. There's also the move to remote work that was happening even before the pandemic, and through the pandemic, it became universal, and employees loved it. I mean, employees they're really looking for that flexibility and freedom to work from anywhere and work on their terms and be more productive as a result. Um, and and lastly, so we have uh, the maturity of communication and collaboration technologies today. Like when we moved from the industrial era into the office era, we had to stay in the same place to be able to be
Yeah.
effective. And in the last few years, we've seen an explosion of technologies that enable us to be productive no matter where we are.
With that too, so with that growth, and even that's so the growth of obviously with where the world is, that is a huge opportunity. You're well positioned in that as well. And even your own team. I was curious about that too, because I saw you're like 500 employees now, 60 plus countries. I think you're like 60% women on the team. Just take me through even growing your own team at Oyster. How has that been since you have this kind of rocket ship of sorts in the last 2 years?
Yeah, exactly. So in 2 years, we've achieved over 500 employees distributed in 60 countries, 60% women, and also we are creating this massively diverse organization that resembles the planet Earth. That's our goal. We believe that that's a superpower for Oyster and for any organization. And how we were able to achieve that essentially by developing a way of working together that works for people, so it's flexible, and give them the freedom of where they want to live and make them successful no matter what they are. And we promoted that through our brand, and suddenly we start receiving tons of job applications. We received today 13,000 job applications per month for a company that is 2 years old. And so essentially, we're changing how work works, and we're making it works for humans.
With that, I have to double click on that. So, okay, diving a little bit deeper into that, what does that look like logistically? So, people in different time zones, you're a lot, I imagine a lot's async. Just take me through how you've thought about that, because I know that I've talked to a lot of founders who are thinking through the same things like, okay, if I do remote and I have all these different things, how do I actually operate? And your company with as many employees as you have, and having done this for the whole time, basically, take me through more of that, like how you kind of manage that and run that within Oyster.
Yeah, so every company will find its own version of async between the ratio between sync and async, right? So it's really you have to experiment and land on where is the right ratio for you. For Oyster, we branded it, we call it follow the sun, because we're in various time zones, and we are very prescriptive about the tools and the rules. So we use Slack for this, we use Asana for that, we use Loom for this, and then we train people on this. We have the Oyster Academy that is our own internal training on taking any person and making them a better remote worker. And we open source that. Any company in the world and any remote worker can come and benefit from the Oyster Academy. It is Oyster. You can find it at oysterhr.com/academy. And we've also designed our value system in the organization to support remote work. So our values is around building trust, thriving together, and elevating talent. So building trust is important because in a remote setting, you don't have this physical signaling, emotional signaling that can build trust, right? So you're missing that. So you need to intentionally build trust. And elevating talent is because our goal is to take any talent in the world, especially from emerging economies, and give them the opportunity to become a better remote worker, and suddenly they have the world as their oyster when they're looking for a job. And lastly, I would say last but not least, we have commitment from the top. Essentially, each leader in the team need to be the best remote worker in the team. So essentially, I'm the CEO of the company. I have the pressure. It's a bit scary sometimes because there's some people in the company that are expert in remote work that more than me now. And so essentially, I need to be the best remote worker in the company.
Okay, there's two things there that we have to go back to. One, the thing you just mentioned. So being the best remote worker in the company. Explain what that means. People are gonna think about, okay, yeah, I hear that, Tony. That makes sense conceptually, but what do you mean by that?
So first is really model the way in using our way of working together. So using the tools correctly, always being prepared, read the material asynchronously in advance and comment in them, be engaged in these conversations. That's from how we work together. In building trust is essentially every transaction I have with my colleagues at Oyster is about building trust, right? And everyone has a different approach to build trust, and you have to be specific to the situation. So for me, there's a number of areas I can use to build trust with the team, and lastly is making sure that I take care of my work-life balance, right? So I create this protection layer between work and my life, so I don't respond over the weekend. I follow focus. We have on Fridays, we have call it Focus Friday, where we don't have an internal meeting, so I don't put any internal meetings, and I focus on getting stuff done during that day. And I really manage my working hours, so I don't work in the morning. I work in the afternoon, in the evening, because I'm based in GMT +2 time zone. I'm based in the beautiful island of Cyprus, while my team is mostly in the US and in Europe. So that enables me to do what I want to do in my life, spend time with my children, take care of my family business, or spend time with my wife, for instance. So and talk about it, right? So essentially, I use my experience as a way to inspire others in the company to follow suit. So I don't expect you, as my colleague, to respond to me over the weekend. I don't expect you to work outside of your working hours, and I respect that.
One thing too, so I saw that post you had mentioned that somewhere around the afternoon, starting working then until like 10 or 11 p.m. because of time zones and everything, which I think, yeah, everyone has to kind of find their cadence within whatever works for them and based on where their team is as well. And going back to one of the things you mentioned around the Oyster Academy, which I love the idea of that, especially having open source. How did that initially come about? And I wanted to deeper into some of the details, but how did that initially come about with the Oyster Academy?
It's a good question, Justin, because really when we started the company and when the pandemic was arriving to this planet, we acquired a company called Delocate that was a consulting company that helps other companies become better at being at remote, essentially build your remote work operations. And we've hired this brilliant team led by an individual called Reese Black, that became our head of remote early on. He was employee number 10, maybe less than that in the company. And so we wanted to be very intentional about designing a new way of working that not only is better for business, but is also better for people.
So that's how it came about. Then diving deeper into it, like this Oyster like Academy is kind of playbook of sorts. What are some aspects of that? Maybe like what does that look like for people who are curious?
Yeah. So So as I said earlier, so it's really the tools and the rules we describe. This is a tool. This is how you use it. We dive into the different type of meetings we have. This is how you do a decision meeting. This is how you do a meeting. You have to create the asynchronous work before the meeting. There's also elements of how do you take care of yourself as a remote worker? What are the things you need to watch out for? What is your responsibility in terms of making sure you manage that work-life balance, and what are your expectations and what we don't expect from you is as important.
With this too, so you mentioned remote work, and obviously that's been forced upon many people, and a lot of people love that. It's interesting talking even to our team at Vitalize, of some of the people on the team talking about, okay, well, what about people who are newer in their career and maybe had just graduated in 2020 or something and never had the in-person work experience? A lot of the young people want that because they haven't had the relationships they built through in person and everything as well. What are you seeing from that on your team around that? People having this desire to somewhat meet people in person, like, and how have you kind of managed that too, Tony?
Yeah, so this is similar to the transition we've had from the plant in the industrial area to the office. Where there was always a first generation of executive or professionals that is coming into the office for the first time. So here we're having a similar transition. It's really an issue of us that have used to work in the office. We are still attached to that way of working.
Yeah.
But if the human brain is very elastic, and the new generation is adapting at very fast rate this new way of working, and they appreciate massively this freedom and flexibility that it gives them. Now, some of the arguments that were mentioned against that was, okay, well, how are they going to be coached? How are they going to be? How do they network? How they create their network if they're not in the office, right? Well, these things can be solved. We assign a buddy to you as you join the company, so you are coached. We create intentionally social ability to connect socially with your team in the company. But that being said, we have to acknowledge that this older generation that used to only work in the office, our life was work. We didn't have many more social opportunities because we used to spend an hour to commute. We need to spend 8-9 hours in the office, and we go back home. We're tired. We're gonna go to sleep, or we would binge watch something on Netflix or something like that, right? So our life was work, and suddenly all 95% of our social connections were within the office. Now we have an opportunity to rethink what work is, and diversify our portfolio of social experiences or social opportunities between your family, your community, your friends, and just to give you an example. I have a house in the countryside in France. It's a small village. I have 3 neighbors. They are all older, 80 plus, and one of them, he can't move, he can't walk very well. His name is Bernard, and in the middle of the winter, his chimney broke, and he called me at 2 p.m. in the afternoon, asking me, "Hey Tony, can you give me a ride to the store? I want to buy this piece of equipment to fix my chimney." Well, I was working from home, and I didn't have a meeting at 2 p.m. So I took the car and I brought him to the store, and he fixed his chimney. If I was in the office, I wouldn't have the opportunity even to help Bernard. So essentially, this gave me an opportunity to be much more connected to him and much more connected to my community. So this is why remote work has an opportunity to reconnect us with our community and our place of living, essentially the land that we live on.
Yeah, it is unique to have this opportunity with remote work, and I think it's something that I always wanted. So years ago, I think I had read like the 4-Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss, and was like, oh, this is interesting, kind of working from anywhere. It was this more foreign concept back then, and even our arbitrage on costs of living in different places and everything like that, and it's evolved. And now this opportunity came, and I work fully remote. Our team works fully remote. With that, though, I'm curious. I've talked to some founders who have decided to set up like hubs for some people have done hubs for their company where like a hub in LA, a hub in whatever, because there's some employees there. If they want to get together in person, maybe they have a shared office. Some have done where they'll meet up every quarter or biannually, they'll meet up as a team. How have you thought about that? Have you had employees wanting that? And like, just curious about your perspective on that, because I know everyone has a different opinion. Just curious what yours is on that too.
Yeah, so we do foster local team meetups at Oyster. So look, I do believe that meeting in person is essential, right? But it's not essential to get stuff done. It's essential to reinforces the trust. And for the first time, my executive team met in person was in November last year. And I remember what Emily, our SVP product, told me. She told me that before this in-person meeting, I knew I could trust everybody. After this in-person meeting, now I can trust everybody. So it's a difference between knowing and feeling, but it's not essential for getting stuff done. And we prove it at Oyster. We've had 20x growth last year. We have an engagement level in the company that is top 2% of all VC-backed companies. But I want to go back to the question that you've asked around.
Yeah, people going, whether it be they have hubs in different cities meeting up, whether they end up. Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah. So having hubs in cities, the drawback of that is you restrict your talent pool. You don't have the world as your oyster when you're looking for talent. That's number one. And number two, when you concentrate in hubs, these hubs get more expensive. If I think about so let me give you an example. So I have a friend who was here this weekend, visiting me in Cyprus. He's a CEO of a technology company, and he said we wanted to go and find talent in less demanded locations. So we've opened a hub in Ireland 2 years ago, and he looked at the data and said the talent in Ireland is more expensive than London now, because all the kind of tech talent went into Ireland. So we are recreating this hub model that increasing disparity in the world, and it's not distributing opportunity.
One thing I'm curious about too with this as well. So, okay, with the growth of it, you mentioned talking about the team and everything with that. I'm curious just on a more tangibly too. There's different solutions people are trying to create, different companies out there to work remotely or payroll, whatever. But what has helped you on the growth side of things with Oyster, like more tangibly? Sales, people coming inbound, you had referrals kick off, you had a huge sales team, you had the marketing side paid up. I mean, obviously it's a combination of things. Just for other company builders out there, what's been helpful, like tangibly on the growth side, to help you get to this point of even raising a Series C and a $1 billion company? I'm curious.
What helped Oyster the most on the GTM side is not only having hired great GTM team, but also we used brand as a way to create awareness for our business. We invested early on in this future of work brand because first and foremost, we are a mission-driven company. We are on a mission to reduce inequality through distribution of opportunity. So we wanted to prove to the world that distributed work is better for business, is better for people and for the planet, and that requires us to adopt a brand strategy as well as the traditional B2B sales and marketing strategies.
With the brand side, what did that mean for you early on? Because I know the companies have gone a lot of different ways with that. Some have gone hard on the press and PR side of things. There's others who are creating content internally. There's conferences and things like that as well. What did that look like for Oyster?
Yeah, so we've used what we call a category creation playbook, where we have every quarter we would concentrate 1 week or 2 per quarter, where we would really focus massively our marketing efforts on a specific theme. Let's say global hiring would be one theme, distributed work would be another theme, hiring for refugee would be another theme. So we would really, instead of spreading our marketing activities in a linear fashion, we created more brand bombs, to use maybe not a great term, but a concentrated brand effort that helped us to pop. And each pop would be bigger and bigger and bigger. That was really helpful. Another part of actually the category creation playbook was you want to have the executive of the company to be visible. So that's why I'm talking to you today. I've accepted and I've taken the ownership of the future of work activism role that I have to do, as well as running the company. And not only me, I have a number of executives in my team. We talked about Reese Black in the beginning, our head of remote, who's now evolved to he's managing workplace design, and he's also talked about he's open sourcing essentially what Oyster is doing to the world, because not only it helps our brand, but it helps every other company out there. This is very similar to John Deere, the tractor company. John Deere, they didn't invent tractors, 100 years ago. What they did is they helped farmers farm better. And we are on a mission to help companies leverage distributed work and improve their business and help people around the world access jobs thanks to remote work. And that's why open sourcing our successes, but also our challenges, has been a very, very positive experience for us.
Yeah, it seems like that's paid off for you. And as you mentioned, like kind of the Oyster Academy, having that being open as well. And I know as we kind of have a few minutes left here, I'm just curious with your position at Oyster and seeing kind of one, it's global, so you're all over the place. You have been in this for a couple of years already now. You think about a lot, as you mentioned, the future of work. What other trends or things are you seeing in future of work that you're interested in, you're curious about, excited about? I'm just curious on what you're seeing from that, because selfishly at Vitalize, we're focused on future of work. So I'm always trying to ping people on what they think the future looks like, what they're excited about. So I'm just curious about anything you have there as well, Tony.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I'm currently most excited about is how distributed work is going to help the world to become more resilient today in face of yet another virtually man-made economical crisis that will impact the lives of millions on this planet. So let me just give you some historical point of view here. So when we've had the last two major crises, so in 2000, where you had the tech bubble, in 2008, where we had a major economical collapse, companies had to reduce their hiring plans, had to maybe make some layoff, and we're really seeing that today in the technology sector. Why? Because they only could hire in very expensive cities where they had offices. Now they have an opportunity to diversify their hiring, and instead of hiring only in tier one cities, they can hire anywhere. And we've run the data. If you hire people in outside of this tier one city, you can reduce your headcount cost anything between 30% to 70%, while paying people more than local salaries, sometimes life-changing salaries. So you not only make your business socially impactful, but you have the opportunity to make your business more efficient, extend your runway, and not to mention that you don't need to pay all these expensive real estate costs that you need in when you have offices. So now, again, while the world is faced with this man-made virtual crisis, now the response can be different. It doesn't have to be layoffs and hiring freezes. It could be hiring globally.
There is an opportunity certainly with this and any kind of global issue that comes about. There's an opportunity within that. We've seen companies spring up in times of the global recession before in 2008 and everything. We've seen companies spring up, and there's opportunities within that. Same thing with this kind of current environment we're in. We're going to see companies spring up as well, whether it be right before, as Oyster did, even during the pandemic as well. We've seen companies come up that are probably going to be global, kind of world-changing companies with the kind of new reality of what we live in. So it is a interesting, exciting time to kind of look around and see what will come from all of this. And where's the best place for people to learn more about Oyster and connect with you, Tony, if they'd like to as well?
Yes, so they can learn about Oyster on our website, oysterhr.com, and they can find me on LinkedIn.
Perfect. Thank you so much for the time today, Tony. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me again, Justin.